Hello, I'm Odin, and as I record this Friday is going to be the last episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And I thought that this week I would make the single most requested prop that I've gotten from that show. It's Baron Zemo's mask. I want to make a Baron Zemo mask. It was joked about in the comments of my last video that I should use the Flag Smasher mask as a base. It's already pretty much the mask I want. I can just build off that. I think it's a great idea, but I don't want to mess this one up. So instead, I use the exact same pattern to make a new one out of 2mm foam. But this new one, I can use it to make my Zemo mask. The idea is to build up onto this mask, add pieces to make the base that has the right shape, and then glue a thin 2mm layer of foam over this first layer to make it look like Zemo's mask. Now Joe has some really good ideas on what these shapes should look like. And he got to work making patterns and creating shapes that are seen under the mask. You could call it the bones of the mask. And I was really happy that he so quickly took on that part of the build, because while I was planning this project, I was almost exclusively concerned with the textures and the look of the skin of the mask. So my plan for the base was to roughly cut out the shapes and then use a rotary tool to sand them down. Now Joe felt the same way, but he was very concerned about getting the angles and ridges correct, not just over the nose and the mouth, but also around the eyes and up the forehead. He used a rotary tool to sand down the sharp edges and make all the seams more organic looking. And while Joe was working on his part of the mask, I started working on my idea for getting the final texture on the outer layer of the foam. In Tinkercad, I created a tool that could roll over the foam and create the lines that I wanted. And then 3D printed the parts. Now I tried two versions. This one that we're looking at now, this has all of the discs connected, so it's just one piece. But then I printed another version with all the discs separate. So I'll give you more details on how this is going to work later in the video.
Guess it's all yours now.
All right, yeah, totally. I might switch the plaster out for the foam one like I did on Bucky.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's totally gonna work.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's totally gonna work.
My new dust mask.
Yeah.
One concern I did have was the eyes needed to be larger.
Or what were you?
Yeah, I was talking about bringing the orbits in. It just looks like there's less...
Yeah, it should be closer.
So Joe drew the eyes larger because when we glue on the final skin, it'll need to wrap into the eye sockets, which will make them all 4 to 6mm smaller than they look right now. And I trust Joe's artistic eye. So when I started to sand the eyes larger, I just followed the lines that he drew on the mask, which really greatly opened up the eyes. I mean, they look a little too big now, but they're gonna fill in with the final skin that I need to start making. I think the underskull is finished. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate all of your help. And it was quite a bit of help with getting this finished. It was funny when I was telling him, hey, I want to make Zemo's mask. And I started describing all the ways I had thought about how to do the texture, how to do the final layer, because that's the only place I was thinking about. And the first thing he told me was, yeah, it's got that great underskull with almost a bone shape here, and you got the shape that goes here, and he starts talking about the underskull. So it's like, dude, why don't you go do that and I'll work on my part. So I think this is gonna work out really well. So thank you, Joe. I really appreciate your help. Now I need some aluminum foil. And I make this pattern the same way that I make most of my patterns. First, I wrap the mask with aluminum foil and make sure that the foil is form-fitting. Then I cover the foil with duct tape, just a single layer. The tape will keep the foil in the current shape, and the foil keeps the tape from sticking to the foam, or whatever it is you could be using as a master form. I use a permanent marker to draw the center line on the mask. Now, you notice that I only really wrapped one side of the head. I'm just going to pattern the right side of the head. Because the mask is symmetrical, I only need to pattern one side of the head. I draw in all the details of the mask as I see them in my reference material. All the lines that I draw are going to be seams, where the foam pieces I will make will actually glue back together. And this project is nice because the mask is just all seams. I'm pretty sure I can make the mask with just the seams that are visible in the show. I make a bunch of registration marks on these seams and stagger them from one side to the other. That way I know how each strip will line up, because I'm going to need to know that I'm not stretching one of the pieces too much, which would cause the pieces to not fit. It would warp the mask and distort everything. And then it'll also cascade the problem with all the additional strips that go on after it. Now the duct tape lets me remove the foil, and I can start cutting into the individual pieces. Now I numbered them, and I took a picture before I started cutting. I flatten out all the pattern parts to make sure that they'll work on flat foam. Now I did have to cut the longest center one right at the bridge of the nose. The only one that I didn't flatten was the ear cover. My ear will bend under the mask, but the plaster ear on my head cast can't move. So if I change the shape of this piece, it could change the shape of the mask. To make them easier to work with, I cut them all out again from cardstock. I also copy all the registration marks and the numbers that I assigned them. The cardboard won't change its shape like the duct tape foil can. Then I trace all of my patterns onto 2mm HD foam. I've got every piece traced twice onto some 2mm foam. What I'm doing is putting each piece of pattern down, and then I'd trace it and then flip it over. That way I get a left side and a right side. I can tell the difference because the right sides are going to have the pencil marks and the left sides are going to be blank cardboard. The other thing I did was make all these notches that are along the sides of the cardboard here. These are registration notches. I only have to put those into the pattern. That allows me to draw out all these little notch lines, all these little registration lines you see on the sides of the pattern pieces. When it comes time to glue this back together, I want to line these up with each other because then the parts will fit the same way I had them on the mask when I made the pattern. At least that's the idea. When I cut the parts out, I didn't cut on the line like I normally do. I left as much material around the parts as I could. So I've got all of my parts cut out. And I didn't cut them completely free yet, on purpose, because I want to put a texture on them. You remember earlier I talked about how I made a 3D printed tool? Well, the point of the tool was to put the texture that goes on Zemo's mask. I can put all this together and put it on and paint it the right color, and it'd be fine. But the one thing that I really wanted to do, the one thing that made me most excited about this project, was putting the texture on it. And I saw Bill Duran's video about using 3D printed tools in order to put a texture onto foam, and I thought, why not do that as a roller so I can do strips? I'm gonna want that part. That way I could do the strips that I need for Zemo's helmet. I mean, they're thinner strips, so this idea is good for this application. It may not work if you need like a zoot suit where everything has to be exactly the same all the way down, but it's a work in progress. It was a first idea, so I thought I would give this a try. If you want to 3D print one of these, I'm gonna put the files I use in the description. They're free, give it a shot. Anyway, I've got two different tools I put together. One is the solid piece, so this is 6 rows all at once, laying out my pattern. And then I've also broke them into individual pieces. The point is that if I wanted to do curves, they would be able to rotate at a different length. Also, I could add and take away. So I might need to drill these out so they have a little more clearance. I took my 6mm drill bit and just made holes a little bit bigger on each one. All right, hey, better. What I'm loading the discs onto is just a small paint roller handle. It's like a touch-up roller. I just removed all of the paint roller parts. Great. Then I realized I needed to wrap tape around each end. This is going to keep the discs in the middle of the roller and keep them together so they don't separate while I'm rolling them. To texture the foam, I just heat it up with my heat gun. And I mean, I heat it up and warm it up a lot. Some of the pieces, a little too much. While the foam is hot, I set it on the cutting mat and then press very hard with the roller. This creates the texture that I want in the foam. After a few pieces, I learned that it was better to use the roller more like a baker's rolling pin. I was able to get better prints this way. And don't go back and forth. Just run over the foam once in one direction. More than that, and the texture looks double exposed. Now, do you see the large disc on the side of the roller, the side that's closest to my left hand? That is my edge guide. I try to keep that on the outside of my pieces, or just over the first pass for the one wider portion on the side of the mask. It took a little bit to set this up, but I'm very happy with the results, except for when I overheated the foam. That piece is okay. So it was really easy for me to overcook the pieces, and I caused some of them to shrink. So I'm just gonna double check them all with my pattern now and make sure that none of them are too small or too warped. Now I can see that these parts are fine because it still matches the pattern. This is the guy that I noticed because it curled up and really wasn't happy. You can see that the curve changed. My piece is a smaller arc. I can stretch it a little, but if I cut it out wrong, I know that all the pieces are not going to fit together correctly. What I started doing while cutting these out is I would set my patterns back on top of the foam and then set weights on the pattern to keep everything from moving. And then I would cut them out following the cardboard pattern and not the pencil line that I had originally drawn. And I would remark the registration guides as well. These guys shrank. The big ones, if these main guys shrank, I'm gonna cut new ones. No, actually, that's really pretty close to right. Oh, interesting. This one's kind of okay. I didn't overcook this one. Well, I'm glad I didn't overcook this one. And cut along the edge of the cardboard. In the end, I cut every piece just like this so that I knew they would fit together correctly. The edges of all the pieces need to be raised up so they look like a seam. So I cut a dozen or so 3mm wide strips of 2mm HD foam using my new CosTools rail cutter. Using contact cement, I glued the strips to the edges on each piece that needs to be a seam on the finished helmet. And I'm gluing the strips onto the back side of the foam, not on the textured side. And this was done to all 22 pieces. Next, to really sell the look of a sewn seam, I used a leather stitch wheel to make regular holes, as if the seams were sewn with a machine. But I didn't add thread, I just made the holes. And actually, Felicia was fooled, thinking that I had sewn the whole thing. I traced the edges of all the pieces so that they would match. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All 22 parts have texture. All 22 parts have the additional piece on the back, so when they're glued down flat, they'll get a bulge for the seam that goes in between. All 22 parts have stitch lines added in. I'm not going to add stitches, but I've got the lines added in, and that's a good texture touch. The last thing that I need to do to every one of these pieces is round off the corners. What do I mean by that? Well, right now, this looks like cut foam. I mean, it is cut foam. But I don't like the 90-degree edge here of the cut foam. So I want to take the Dremel and I'm going to round off where the two seam lines are in between each part. That way they've all got kind of the nice leatherish seam that it should have. Once I've done that to all 22 pieces, I think I can start actually gluing it onto the mask. One by one, I started to round over the edges. Now this went pretty quick. It wasn't that hard to do, but there are enough parts that it feels like it took a long time. Alrighty, I've got all the pieces prepped. This whole build is about getting these pieces prepped, right? This is the final look. I mean, it's not, this is exploded flat on the table, but the pieces all have all the texture elements I believe that I'm gonna want. I mean, I haven't actually glued them on yet, so there's a small possibility it won't work the way I want it to, but I'm pretty sure it will. So for each of these parts, not only was it a pattern piece created, then it was cut out of 5mm foam, then I cut up a strip and glued that onto the back, then I heated each, well, not in that order, but heated it up and put the texture on it and put the stitch marks on it and ground it down. All day, I've been getting these pieces done, but now I can actually glue them on. So I got all the parts laid out. I know I've got all the pieces that I need. I know that I've got a left and a right of everything. I've double checked, I've triple checked. I've made sure that when I cut them out by actually laying my original pattern back on top of the pieces I heated up. I've never done that before, but it was certainly a way to make sure that I was cutting things out the way I wanted it to. Let's glue it together. I'm going to start with the face, I think, because that's just going to be the easiest. And I definitely want to keep an organization on these. I want to keep an organization on these because I don't have marks on them, right? Like I should. I can mark them on the back, and I suppose if I'd planned ahead, I would have done that. It didn't happen. So let me just go ahead and... It's kind of interesting to be at this stage now, just spread glue on the back of each strip and paint glue on the face of the mask. And after about 10 minutes, the glue dries and gets sticky. and now the parts will stick together. I press the center edge of the strip up to the center line on the mask, and after the strip is in place, I use the blunt end of a hobby knife to really stick the corner down and pop up that seam that I made. I just continue adding strips across the face. I'm so very hopeful on this. All right, the mouth is working out. Now this is the most supported part of the whole thing, but this is totally working. I'm getting the raised stitch, leather-ish line. Whatever the heck this mask is supposed to be made out of, CGI fabric. It's going together the way I want it to. I'm getting a ton of texture here. This is pretty cool and very promising. I don't have the entire face shell, but that's okay, because the back of the head, the edges need to glue together, and if I have to, I can lay a strip on the inside to reinforce these seams. So let's just keep going here. Next, I add the first strip that goes over the head. Right here at the nose is the only seam that needs to be hidden. I still continue to crease the edges on all of the seams, popping the edges up just a little. And I keep adding strips before the contact cement dries too much and loses its stickiness. I could apply more cement, but I'd rather just put all the parts on now while the time is right. But here on the bridge of the nose, I don't want this open gap. This really shouldn't be here. I can glue the gap shut with some super glue, squeeze the parts together and hold them for about a minute. And I'd rather just hold these than use a kicker for the super glue, because I don't want the residue from the kicker all over the nose and face of the mask when it comes time to paint the mask. I let the strips just hang off the back of the mask for now. The Flag Smasher mask doesn't fully cover the back of the head, but I can fix that in a minute. I had cut some 27mm strips of 2mm foam and then just glued them behind each seam, which also gave me enough width to match the edges. To attach the earpieces, I cut a large patch of 2mm foam just for everything to attach to, but I only stuck it to the face side of the gap. I placed the ear parts so that they matched correctly with the side of the head, and then pulled the back of the mask to fit the back of the ear. And at this point, I can no longer put the mask onto my head cast because the plaster of Paris ears won't move and will distort the foam, and I really don't want that to happen. But I can attach the right side ear the exact same way, and pull the side shut to complete the build of the helmet. I trimmed the even ends of the foam strips around the base of the mask, just to make them all neat and kind of the same. Congratulations, Odin, you made a foam stocking cap. Well, it's a little different. It's not just a stocking cap. I mean, there's a little more going on here. Where's the eyes? There they are. Because it doesn't... It looks like one, but there's definitely a face shape, right, that is specific to this mask that makes it not a stocking cap. And the big thing is it doesn't radiate from the center of the top. Most knitted caps have the hole here and they work their way around, right? This hood is not made that way. It's got, a bunch of parallel lines that run down the whole thing. So what I want to do before I paint it is on the inside here, I can feel the void between the Flag Smasher mask base that we used and then the mouth that we had put on for Baron Zemo. So I want to cut out some more of the Flag Smasher stuff because I don't need it. It's pretty hard for the camera to see here, but I cut out the loose 2mm layer that was originally the Flag Smasher mouth. There we go. All right. Hey, that's better. Well, that's not so bad, actually. Having that away from my mouth, that helps a lot. All right. I can breathe. It's not perfect. What I want to do is I'm going to take the X-Acto and I'm going to poke holes, just a few, in between the seams. And hopefully I'll be able to draw air through those holes. And that'll be an improvement. I carefully cut right between the seams on the outside. Just 6 little holes as tall as the blade, right over the mouth area. On the inside, these holes are wedge-shaped. They open wide for better airflow. Oh yeah, that made a huge difference. So I exhale, and it's all over inside the mask, of course, right? Because it pretty much comes out the eyes. It's just the way the exhale is working. But these 6 little holes I put in the seams here, totally fresh air. That works. That's cool. I need to paint it. Am I really up to just painting it? I think I'm really up to just painting it. My base coat for painting is a Plaid FX Paints purple color. It's called Voodoo Violet. No sealer is necessary. The paint is made to stick to EVA foam. And when I textured all the pieces, they were already heat sealed. The single layer of purple paint isn't perfect. It's a little bit splotchy because it has some light spots on it, and I can definitely see foam coloration poking through, especially with some of the stitches. But that's okay, because what I want to do next is do a black wash. What I mean by that is I'm going to take some black acrylic paint, and today I'm going to try mixing it with alcohol instead of water to thin it out, and I'm going to paint this thinned black acrylic paint over the whole thing, which is going to darken all the purple back down. And then once that dries, I can go back and sponge the clean purple back over it again. So I'm going to end up with 3 layers of paint, which means this layer, not being perfect purple, is okay. The black wash paint I mixed up is still a little too thick, but once I started, I needed to keep going, or just that one spot would have been an extra dark black. But I could smear an area and then wipe a lot of it down with a paper towel. And I tried my best to keep all the black paint in the seams. It's been a couple of hours and I've given the wash time to dry. Let's make sure it's actually, well, not stuck to the paper. There, it's not stuck to the paper. Make sure it's actually dry in the darker crack, deeper cracks. Yeah, it looks like it is. Excellent. So what I want to do next is take the exact same base color I started with and lightly sponge paint, kind of the whole thing, to try and lighten it back up a little bit. He isn't this dirty. We're not making oil slick Baron Zemo. This needs to just be a weathering, a little bit of making pieces darker. So I need to put the base coat back on over it. Oil slick Baron Zemo. Marvel, what if the venom parasite infected Baron Zemo? The color change is almost immediate. I can see right away where I painted. And by sponge painting, I'm not brushing on the paint, and that keeps the light color paint out of the deeper cracks in the details, as long as I get the excess paint off the sponge before I apply it. And when this coat dries, I make a lighter shade of purple by adding a little bit of white. And now I can dry brush the highlights, or sponge dry brush the highlights. What I'm really just trying to do is apply a little more sponge paint just on some of the raised areas. The sponge that I'm using is just a piece of polyfoam, or couch foam. It's still sponge-like, it's just got a much smaller cell structure. Oh, that's too much. And when I add too much of a lighter color, I can just smear it a little bit, and that brings it back to where I want it. Just a little bit of light color dry brushing on the brows and on some of the upper seams. I think that's everything I want. All the materials I used for this project I already had in the shop. I put a list in the description. And I finished my Baron Zemo mask. Now, I know this was kind of a complicated mask to build because there was actually 2 masks in one, maybe even 3, using the Flag Smasher mask as a base, and then we added all this like bone structure to it, and then made a whole another mask and glued it on top, but it totally works. It totally looks like it's sewn together, but it's not. Now, if you really, really wanted to make your own Baron Zemo mask, I'm going to take not only the files for the 3D printed tool that I made that makes the texture, but all the pattern pieces we made in this episode. I can put those together in a couple of files. There's going to be a link right in the description. You can download those for free, and you can make your own. Now, I know you're not going to necessarily have a head cast, so it'll make it a little more challenging, but you should be able to do it if you're persistent. And I got to tell you, it's a lot of fun to have your very own Baron Zemo. your very own Baron Zemo mask. This thing is super cool, and I bet it's going to be a lot of fun at the con. So if you want to make one, I think you should. And I know that there's going to be lots of different ways you can make a Baron Zemo mask from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But this is how Odin makes. And I've got finished because I've got English.
Blah, 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 blah. Joe help me, blah, blah, blah. Cut to the finished project. This is how Odin makes.
I want to thank Advexen, Kara, and all of my Patreon supporters. My Patreon support is the #1 thing that makes this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to make? Please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.